In this video I'll give you 9 tips to help you win in the Settlers of Catan expansion, Cities and Knights. I'm Treeckosaurus and I have a 50% win rate in Cities and Knights. I'm not saying this to brag, but because I want you to keep an open mind to the tips I'll give. These Cities and Knights tips will go from easy to advanced, so keep watching.
Let's start the list with tip number 1. Focus on wheat and paper. In Cities and Knights you have special resources called commodities. One of them is the paper commodity, and the value you can get from paper is insane. Believe me, it's absolutely busted. Even with the very first settlement, it's a good idea to place on a high producing wood spot. The papers you gain can be spent in the city calendar to get progress cards and the Aquadukt. The science cards are considered to be the strongest to pick, and I also think they're the way to go. It always depends on your situation, of course. Wheat is another hex you want to place on early on in the game, and you want to generate enough wheat to defend your cities against the Barbarians consistently. I've done some testing lately, and what I've noticed is you can find a use for wheat really easily. Which brings us to tip number 2. Allow your opponents to lose their cities. We all know if the Barbarians win the battle against the Knights, cities become settlements. And because of the strength of the city calendar, you need cities to win. The odds of winning a game in which your city got destroyed are lower than 5%. So, make sure you keep your city no matter the cost. On the other hand, if someone else loses a city, your odds of winning increase by a lot. When you lost a city at the start, you're technically in 4th place. And don't forget, the 4th place is your best friend, if it's not you. It's time for tip number 3. Stay behind in points and ahead in resource gain. For me, this tip was the real game changer.
Before my main focus was on resource gain, I was just your average player. After figuring out I needed to focus on resource gain, I was able to value my every move and understand why a move is great. It works well for the base game and even better in Cities and Knights.
You see, being ahead in victory points is a downside in Cities and Knights. Because there are so many progress cards which target the highest victory point player like the Saboteur, the Master Merchant, the Wedding, and if they are played well, the Alchemist, the Inventor, the Spy and the Deserter. I always recommend to use them against the player who is in the lead. You really want to think twice when you're about to take the longest road, or when you want to become the defender of Catan. But to protect your city from the Barbarians, you need knights. And with those knights, you can move the robber around the board, which is tip number 4. If your knight is activated and your robber is placed on a hex while your activated knight is on an intersection directly linked to that hex, you can chase the robber away. In Catan Universe, you click on the knight and select chase away the robber and your knight deactivates. Now here's the first trick. Each time you chase the robber away, you effectively lose a wheat, because you want to reactivate the knight. But you also get to steal a card from your opponent, which is a win for you in my opinion. If you place your knight on a hex with an opponent's settlement or city and your second knight, you can move the robber again. You can do this until you can't repeat the trick, either by lacking wheat or by being out of activated knights. And make sure you know where you want to place the robber eventually. When you're blocking a hex, look at the intersections around the hex. Make sure you block a hex with no activated knights around it. But that's not a rule. Sometimes it's better to block them at other spots. Like when it's unlikely the opponent will block you, or if there's a spot that's vital to their game plan. Another thing that's vital to anyone's game plan are city improvements. Here's tip number 5. Play the city calendar. In general, upgrading your city calendar is a great play to do. However, it's not effective to upgrade it all the way through. The most effective upgrade is the tier 1 upgrade. Here's why. It only costs 1 commodity and it gives you a massive amount of progress cards. In this graph you see the odds of you getting one of these cards. When you buy a tier 1 improvement, you improve your odds with 5.5%. It was a huge surprise for me to find out having 3 tier 1 city improvements gives you the same odds of getting a card as 1 calendar path upgraded all the way through, 16.7%. I believe it's very strong to focus on one of the paths, preferably one with little competition. So if the other players all go for the science path, you'd better put your attention on the politics or the trade path, and build that metropolis with no resistance. Which brings us to tip number 6. How do the Barbarians versus Knights mechanics work? The mistake I see made way too often is a player losing their city. Sometimes it happens and you can't do anything about it. But knowing the mechanics can prevent you a lot of city losses. So here they are. The amount of activated knights fight against the Barbarians, which represents the amount of cities on the board. If there are more activated knights than cities, the cities remain unharmed. On top of that, the player who contributed the most to the island's defense is rewarded with a victory point. If there's a tie, the tied players all get a progress card. Now we take a look at the Barbarian victory. And this is where it gets tricky. When the Knights lose, the player or players with the lowest contribution to the island's defense have to downgrade a city to a settlement. But there's one exception, a metropolis. Once a city is a metropolis, it can't be destroyed by barbarians. If you have two cities and one of them is a metropolis, the other can still be destroyed though. A metropolis still counts for the barbarian attack, but it has its own protector. So it's kinda like Gotham with Batman. Now I think about it, the settlers of Gotham, bats and billionaires would be a great expansion. Okay, back to the main topic. A strong play you can make, knowing the mechanics, is building a city before the first barbarian attack. The situation is like this. Everyone has one city and a knight to protect it. But you build the city right before the attack. The barbarians win, everyone loses one city, and you're the only one left with one. Knowing the exact game mechanics has helped me make better decisions. That's why I made a video covering all the cities and knights rules, and it's linked in the top right corner. Which brings us to tip number 7. Play around the Deserter. The Deserter is a card from the Politics deck which allows you to steal one of your opponent's knights, which is incredibly strong. You are allowed to choose which opponent, but the opponent decides which one of their knights gets stolen. So here's my advice. Always build a second knight before you upgrade your first knight to level 2. It makes it so the Deserter is less likely to be used on you, because your opponent hopes to get a level 2 knight out of it. You also don't want the Deserter to steal your entire defense, because you want to keep your city. So, build a second knight and play around the Deserter. It may cost some extra wheat to feed the 2 knights, but tip number 8 might help with this. Tip number 8. Get the Aquadukt as soon as possible. In my opinion, getting the Aquadukt is the second strongest play you can make in Cities and Knights. The strongest would be using a spy to steal a spy to steal a spy to steal a spy to steal a merchant or something along those lines. Besides the strong science cards, the Aquadukt allows you to gain many resources if you use it right. First of all, you want to keep the amount of numbers you gain resources from to be as low as possible. So number differentiation is a good thing until you have the Aquadukt. Building a settlement on 2 new numbers may not be the best idea in this case. You just want to gain more resources from the numbers you already have. The second play you can make improving the Aquadukt is by using the Inventor card. The Inventor allows you to switch 2 numbers. You still want to improve your odds obviously. But when you already have a 5 and no 9, it's better to get a second 5 than your first 9. Which brings us to tip number, the second 5. City walls shouldn't be underestimated.
But yet they are. And I get it. You basically spend 2 resources for some sort of insurance.
However, it only needs to protect you once from not losing your cards to get the value back. Because it saves you 4 cards. And believe me, the situation occurs a lot during an average Cities and Knights game. Because you start off with a city and a settlement, you gain a lot of cards right off the bat. On top of that, you spend 2 bricks, and bricks are fairly useless in this game mode. And as always, I have a very special bonus tip for you. Master the base game first. If you want to achieve success in the Cities and Knights game mode, I recommend understanding the relevant dynamics of the base game as well. Because Cities and Knights has so many things you can pay attention to, the core essentials of both game modes can remain hidden for a long time. I'm talking about the rarest resource dynamic, hand tracking, when to take the lead, table talk, and a lot more. I've made a video covering these topics, which can be found in the top right corner. So there we have it, 9 tips for you, so you can improve your win rate by a huge margin right away. I hope you find the tips to be helpful. I'd like to know which tip was the most helpful for you, so please let me know in the comments. I reply to every single one of them, so come at me. If you want to continue learning, there are a lot of relevant and actionable videos full of tips on the Treeckosaurus gaming channel. I'm covering Catan strategy tips, Catan Universe gameplay and the King of Catan show, which is all about the online board game and the online Catan Tournament I host.
If you don't want to miss that, I recommend subscribing to the channel right away. If you're still on the fence, I have this video with 12 actionable Settlers of Catan tips and the official King of Catan playlist lined up right here.